Okay, everyone, thank you for coming and listening. And we're really excited about this panel. We put this together over the last couple months. Everybody on the panel has a very vested interest in CMMC. We've all put a lot of effort and investment into the program. And we want to tell you a little bit about the program, where the program is going, and we're very confident it is going in those directions. And what you can do to be a part of it, whether you're looking to be an assessor, a pre-assessor, consultant, an instructor in this ecosystem, or if you're an organization seeking compliance. What do you need to do and what do you need to be aware of? So my name is Dan Turricini. I started this journey as a provisional assessor and a provisional instructor. I've been teaching CMMC classes for about 1.5 years now. I come from a long background of FSMA and other models. So I've been an assessor and an auditor for technical issues on FSMA and FedRAMP. And I had my own data center as a government program of record. And I actually had a FSMA compliant system back in the turn of the century. And we did the whole continuous monitoring and all of that stuff. So I'm very aware of the problem and the solution for keeping our data safe. I continued. I got a registered practitioner badge. Then I passed my certified CMMC practitioner. And then I just passed my certified assessor. So I'm looking forward to getting in there at the mix with a lot of the companies out there and working through your compliance requirements. So what is the problem? The problem is we're losing a lot of IP. We're losing a lot of money. About 1/5 of the breaches studied in this report were a result of supply chain compromise. So it's not only you have to worry about, it's your supply chain that you work with. The other notable number up there is the cost of cyber threat to the United States versus the rest of the globe. We are the target. We're the target for a lot of reasons. We're the target from our adversaries. We're a target from non-state actors who are just trying to get money. Things like Colonial Pipeline, whatever you want to think about. It's always in the news. The other thing that's interesting, and I've been working in this space since the early mid-90s when we were protecting sensitive but unclassified information. We changed the name every once in a while to protect the innocent. But the reality is stolen and compromised credentials are still the most common cause of every attack. Everybody talks about ransomware, but they don't get in until they social engineer or phish your information. It also is the hardest thing to find. So the average right now is about 327 days to identify that attack has been done. So there's a lot of damage already done. We have the technology, we have the smarts, we have the ability to avoid a lot of this. My opinion is we've generally ignored what we could do over the last 25 to 30 years. I retired about 5 years ago. I got interested in CMMC when I heard Katie Arrington speaking and some other folks. I decided to come back into the workforce and share some of my experiences and some of my expertise to help this movement. So we talked about this. Phishing is still the biggest threat that we have. We don't know who we are. This is a 1993 New Yorker cartoon. The dog's telling the other dog, nobody knows I'm a dog on the internet. Nobody knows who you're dealing with. I mean, you would not go to a used car salesman and deal with somebody you really didn't know, you didn't talk to, you can't see face to face. But we do business over the internet every day, and we have no idea who's on the other end. And so much, I mean, I get it every day now. We're just talking about that. On my cell phone, on my email, on WhatsApp, on social media, people are always trying to get to know you. I want to know more about you. What they're trying to get at is your personal information. That leads to the phishing and the other attacks. And then don't forget the sneaker net, right? We always talk about cyber and the ones and zeros going over the internet. But don't forget, even in shows like this, people are laying down USB tokens that may have malicious code on it, hoping you'll pick it up, hoping you'll stick it in. Maybe not this conference, but certainly a lot of conferences throughout the country. So we got to address this organizationally, right? So the DoD, they're addressing this from a warfighter perspective, and that's great. We need to do that. They have an offensive mission. We don't in the commercial world. We have a purely defensive mission. We want to protect our information. And now, with CMMC coming along, we want to win contracts. So we want to prove to the federal government that we can protect their information. So the annual estimated loss of intellectual property from the U.S. is $600 billion. That doesn't count the fraud. That doesn't count the waste and abuse. This is just IP walking out the door. It's happening in small and large organizations. It's happening at higher education facilities all over the nation. I did a couple of assessments for some very large universities that get upwards of up to $1 billion a year in grant money. And that stuff's just walking out the United States every day. The loss of IP and other reasons put our warfighters' lives at danger and diminishes our global competitive advantage. What if somebody hacked into a specification storage facility in a manufacturing plant and was able to change the specification just enough so a wing on an airplane fell off and the plane crashed? What if somebody played with the GPS system? We know it's already happening. Some of our targeting systems are dependent on GPS. What if somebody messed with the navigational aids that are out there and ship went aground? It's been happening. Doesn't make the front page news, especially the shipping part, because the United States forgets we're a maritime nation. But it's happening now. And we're at risk not only from our warfighter perspective, but are we able to supply our theaters of war? Our maritime is weak, our maritime industry is weak, and it's way behind the times. I mean, they're 20, 30 years behind what everybody else is doing with digitalization. So my thesis is, we know how to do this, let's fix it. From CMMC perspective, we have to understand institutionalization and continuous improvement. CMMC is not you get certified and you're done, right? You got to keep that momentum going. We need to be persistent and habitual. People are a big part of the problem. They don't have to be, but we let them do whatever they want to do. We don't pay attention to what they're doing. We got to keep them educated. Cooperation. This is what you see at the podium here. All of these people are in the ecosystem. All of these people are looking to sell what they sell, but they're going to work together to get the message out. They got to cooperate because we're in the early stages. This is an early stage program. It's coming. It's not stopping. We're going to start assessments sometime next year for sure. Contracts are not going to be awarded sometime in 2025 if you're not compliant. So you got to get on board with this. And if you haven't started heartily right now, you're way late. So I'm going to introduce my panel, and I'm going to let them talk to you a little bit. I have Ali Prabrai. He's the Chief Executive Officer at ecfirst. Greg Manson, Vice President of Security, Audit, and Compliance at Pego. Toby Musser, Chief Executive Officer at M&S Group. And David Brown, the Chief Executive Officer of the Learning Tree International. So we're gonna start with M&S Group here.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. M&S Group is an authorized C3PAO, and we have the honor of having helped 20% of the existing authorized C3PAOs pass their DIBCAC assessments. What that means in English is we believe in open source business. We share the policies, procedures, and practices that help others succeed to defend our warfighter. And everything we do is focused around defending that person in the field. I think a very important piece that Dan said, don't miss it. It's not about the money. Yes, it's about the money. But when somebody's body armor fails because the mix is off, because China took the design and then modified the mix on the ceramics, and the warfighter's hit and dies, this is real stuff, and it's so important. This is about lives and humans. And sometimes we get off into the numbers and the esoteric things of cybersecurity, but we need to remember this is about our warfighters defending our country, and I just want to make sure that's at the top of our mind. CMMC, we have 7 CCAs, those are authorized people to help assess you, and 15 CCPs. There's a whole bunch of rules that are coming out to push this. I want to draw your attention, if you could go to the next slide. So our experience is real in implementation, but we saw through implementation that there was a need to help people actually achieve what is required under their contracts. CMMC is not a new requirement for you to do new stuff. It is only about us assessing that you're doing the stuff you already said you would do. We're not adding new cybersecurity requirements. We're not making you do a new thing. This is all already in existence, and all CMMC is an assessment process to ensure you're doing the things you said you were going to do. There's a lot of FUD out there on the internet and bad information saying that this is going to increase costs and compliance adds burden. CMMC doesn't add anything other than us looking at what you're doing. All of the things you have to do are under other regulations and other requirements. So I really want to get that message out there that CMMC is only about us assessing what you're doing. It is not anything new. Dan, can you do the next slide? Okay, so a couple things here. Tomorrow, FAR 40 should have a release that starts to extend CMMC to all federal contracts. That's in the Federal Register. They could delay it again, but tomorrow we'll hear about whether this audit and assessment practice extends to the entire federal contracting base, not just DoD. It's important for you to watch what's changing, but there's too much. So let me make it really easy for you. What I'm asking you to do is have your team spend 320 seconds a day, 5 minutes and 20 seconds, reading the CMMC Level 2 Assessment Guide. If you do that, you'll read it in 1 month. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to absorb it. You'll just get a sense of what this assessment practice is. If you do that for 3 months, 320 seconds a day, guess what? There's 320 things you have to do in the standard that we're looking at. So the 320 seconds a day, 5 minutes and 20 seconds, 320 things we're going to look at and see if you're doing. It's not rocket science. It might be tedious, but this is very doable, and the requirements are coming very soon. Jump to the next slide here. We do this stuff. We've already participated in 4 joint assessments with DIBCAC through our team members and other C3PAOs. So we know what it takes and we know what it costs. And we want to give you really good data. Jump to the next slide. Okay, here's what it's looking like. We've gone through actual assessments with DIBCAC. It's running 200 to 300 hours of effort for one location. What I just said in English is $45,000 to $75,000. If you do that over a 3-year period and finance it, that's $2,000 a month. It's just the time it takes. So you're going to review all the documents, the policies, procedures, and practices. That's about 90 hours of effort for the lead assessor. Then you have your QA, your project management, your on-site time with 1 to 3 people, and that's where you're getting the number of hours of effort to deliver. Everything I'm telling you is subject to change when the final rule comes, but these are actual numbers from joint assessments that have already happened, so I'm trying to give you real data, and we desperately need more humans who are trained and certified to do this work, and you're going to hear from a number of the other gentlemen here about their businesses, but just want to give you real data and just push the urgency behind this. And that's all. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Toby. Okay, now we're going to move to Tego. Greg Manson.
Toby's right. CMMC is an assessment process. You're assessing against controls. If you don't have those controls, you're going to have gaps. And that's where an RPO comes in, and that's where Tego can help you. I'm Greg Manson, the VP of Advisory Services for Tego. Tego is, by revenue, the largest professional services company based headquartered in North Carolina. A lot of people don't know our name. Hopefully you will as we start to branch out and get more involved. If you could go to the next slide. And the involvement's important to me. Our mission in the advisory department is to reduce risk. So we do a lot of assessments. We engage with a lot of customers. And that's our core focus, is to reduce risk. That includes security risk. It includes compliance risk, which we're talking about today. But it also includes something that's near and dear to my heart. In my prior career as an IT director and CIO, we have to reduce risk to IT operations and cost. And that makes our advisory team uniquely suited to help you in this endeavor to become CMMC compliant as a registered practitioner organization. Because we're going to help you balance and work on your side in preparation for the assessment to make sure that you have the controls in place that you need, that you can implement those controls in a cost-effective way that's not going to add 15 IT staff to your department. And we can do it as an RPO with our professional services, the aforementioned group, our all senior level systems, applications, and network administrators that are going to allow us to work and address your plans of action and your gaps and help you eventually get compliant. But the key concept for Tego as your RPO is that we are on your team. We're part of your team. We can do everything beyond the pre-assessment and identifying the gaps, including internal audit as a service. We're maintaining and monitoring your controls for you, in addition to helping consult and do the implementation for you. It's a tremendously, I was talking to Dan, if I can call you out, just a few minutes ago. We're a force multiplier. We're not a cost. And it's going to get you to a place where you can get compliant, stay compliant, and ultimately reduce risk, because we're dealing with one of the best security frameworks that you can talk about here in this 171. If you could go to the other slide, next slide. That's just, and then that's me. It's a CV. If you could go to the next slide. Wasn't there one in between? Did you? Yeah, see, he's missing one. I did want to mention that we do have a broad range of experience beyond CMMC. Primarily started working in HIPAA, but working with Sarbanes-Oxley. And also we have a niche in being able to, if there's any life sciences customers out there, we can help you with IT compliance for BARDA. So if there's anyone out there with life science, I'd be interested to talk to you. There's a lot of overlap with CMMC, but BARDA has its unique requirements, and I'm quite proud of my experience with that. But it's actually helped me make a better program and provide better services as an RPO. You could go to that. Go to the slide where why CMMC. So who needs to be certified? I guess that's interesting. We got different sides. How about this? We'll go a cappella, right? Without anything. We all need, if you're in the DIB, you're going to be an organization seeking compliance. It's that simple. We've all talked about we're going to be there. What you need to understand about the ecosystem is there's two sides to it, the way I see it. You have implementation, you have the certification side. The implementation piece is the fun part, where we can go in, we can do the pre-assessment. I'm working on your team. We're going to help you understand what you can do to address control gaps, get compliant, and reduce risk. We're going to hit all the other points from the slides, so we'll go on over to David.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Now we're going to move to Dave Brown and the Learning Tree.
All right, great, thanks. Well, they gave me two microphones. I'm not sure which one's working here. I'll scoot forward a little bit. When Dan asked me to speak, one of the things that he wanted us to touch on was where we fit within the ecosystem. And you've heard a little bit from colleagues here on the panel about assessment, about being a practitioner or a registered professional. At the start of the process is licensed publishing content and a licensed training partner. Some of you in the audience are corporations that are looking to ultimately be assessed. You want to be prepared for that. You may do internal learning for your own staff in preparation for what you need. You may hire professionals like practitioners in preparation for those assessments. Some of you in the audience are looking to be registered professionals and potentially assessors. From a training partner point of view, we are the first port of call. We use licensed training partner content from the ecosystem. The next step in the process for really anyone is to make themselves aware and knowledgeable about what CMMC is, what's involved, and to know what you don't know. So I think when the CMMC was first announced, the larger share of interest was in individuals looking to become assessors or practitioners. And interestingly, as time has gone by, at least from a Learning Tree point of view, we are seeing more and more organizations looking to educate their internal staff for awareness purposes, but also to have a practitioner staff in-house, particularly for organizations that have to get multiple systems in multiple locations certified, or assessed, excuse me. So where do we play? We really bootstrap the ecosystem, preparing organizations, preparing assessors to be that support network for all of you that are part of the defense industrial base. Beyond that, our mission as an organization is to support your mission, which is to achieve the compliance that DoD requires to ensure, and that the NIST 800-171 requires, but also to ensure that you're doing that effectively. Next slide, please. You can keep going. I covered that already. So in the context of why we, Learning Tree, or any learning partner would be interested in participating in this ecosystem, for us, it really comes down to the mission of the organizations that we serve. Learning Tree has a multi-decade heritage of being an IT training and cybersecurity training company. And the companies and organizations that we serve run the gamut from the federal government, the state and local enterprises, and then obviously commercial enterprises, including the DIB. Your mission is our mission, and one of the things that we know, particularly around larger endeavors, is it's not just typically about a certification or an assessment. It is about people, process, and technology. So while we're here to talk about CMMC, I would encourage all of you, as you're going through the process, doing more research to decide what you want to do as you seek to become CMMC compliant, that you think about how you're going to manage change. business continuity, all of the things that go into not just understanding what needs to be done, but ensuring that you can maintain and deliver that continuity once you've gotten there. Next slide, please. So from an organizational point of view, our primary delivery, and you should seek this from any learning partner, is the subject matter expertise that we bring to bear. Yes, we and our competitors are training companies. Training, you could say, is training. That's not quite true. What really matters is not just knowledge of the content, but the real expertise of the people doing the training. And Learning Tree focuses on hiring real-world industry experts that are there not just to help you understand the licensed content and to do what the certification tells us we need to do, but ultimately to help you bring that into the context of your organization. And the backgrounds of our instructors are practitioners first, instructors second, meaning that we have people that have been with the military, people who have been with the large defense industrial complex, people who have been with smaller commercial businesses, cybersecurity engineers, network engineers, CTOs. The bench of assessors and instructors, or assessor instructors that we have is quite robust. And when you're shopping around for a learning partner, which you will need if you want to become a practitioner or a certified assessor, pay attention to those credentials because they do matter. Next slide. So why start now? That's the big question. Obviously, rulemaking is still to come later this year. You heard a reference from Toby that FAR 40 may come out tomorrow, and it may signal that the CMMC requirement will stretch beyond defense and into the civilian agency's supply chain. That's one of the reasons that Learning Tree got into this space. If you think about it from a commercial point of view, and many of you represent commercial enterprises, the ability to maintain and support multiple assessments, multiple certifications, if you will, makes things complex. And our belief when we entered this ecosystem was that the 800-171 is the foundation, the what, the standard that we all need to comply with, becomes a certification process that the government inherently should desire to make consistent. So my point is, for those of you that are interested in this space, this is going to be, in my opinion, a big market. It's not just the DoD supply chain. It actually potentially will become a civilian agency supply chain. And around the world, whether you're in Canada, Japan, or Europe, if you're part of that supply chain, there probably will be conformity with other governments adhering to certifications that are similar. So get in the game early. This is fairly complicated. The practitioners and assessors that can work with you can simplify it, but it does take time, and most of us do not know what we don't know yet. So good luck with it. Hopefully Learning Tree can help you out, and I'll turn it over to Dan for our next speaker.
Okay, now we got Ali Prabrai from ecfirst.
We can go to the next slide. All right, really excited to be here. Terrific panel here. Thank you, Dan, for the opportunity. Some of you who are in the cybersecurity space, you may recognize some of the credentials and certifications in the cybersecurity space. CISSP, Security Plus, these are all industry gold standards, if you will, in terms of certifications. My organization, ecfirst, is very focused in terms of CMMC. We were one of the first organizations as an LPP, and as David mentioned, authorized to develop official CMMC content. And on the logos that you see on, actually, let's go to the next slide. So these are logos that are very specific to the CMMC ecosystem. And for the past 24 months, this has been our passion, working really hard in the CMMC ecosystem. It's a tsunami that's coming. I think when the side view mirror in your car, the object is closer than you think it is, kind of summarizes. And there's a huge opportunity for individuals, to take their career and their skill sets to the next level. I cannot see a future 3 to 5 years from now where anyone who's a cybersecurity professional does not have the CMMC designation. So those two credentials that David was talking about, CCP and CCA, Certified CMMC Professional and Certified CMMC Assessor, those are in production today. David's organization, like my organization, are delivering training programs as we speak for individuals to achieve those designations. My organization was the first organization in the country to actually roll out the Certified CMMC Assessor credential. So there's a lot of opportunity for individuals in this ecosystem. Dan? Some things about, I'm very passionate about this space. Some numbers that I think are going to be very important to anyone who's in the CMMC ecosystem. How many levels, how is CMMC organized? It's organized into 3 levels. We recognize that in CMMC version 2.0. How many domains in the CMMC ecosystem? 14. That's another number that we're all going to be familiar with. 3 levels, 14 domains. How many practices? 110. And I think we've all heard that, 110 practices. But going back to what Toby said, 320 seconds a day. Where did that magic number come from? Was Toby drinking, right? Where did 320 come from? The reason 320 is a magic number in the CMMC space is because that's the number of assessment objectives that have to be met to meet the CMMC requirements. And the document that he was referring to, CMMC Level 2 Assessment Guide, I did nothing for about a year just reading that document over and over again. It's 270 plus pages, but read about 10, 15 pages a day and you'll get the gist of it. That's the number 320 that organizations and individuals have to be aware of, because if you don't know those assessment objectives, achieving certification is a serious challenge. Go ahead. So, like I mentioned, ecfirst, our content has been approved by the DoD for CMMC certification training classes, and we are delivering it virtually and in public classes for several months now. Every month we've got virtual and public classes going on, and we're very excited about the materials that we put together. Go ahead, Dan. I've been working on this book that will be out sometime in July to kind of a handy guide, if you will, to navigate your journey to achieving CMMC certification. What could be more exciting? And then the journey to certification, there are a lot of steps through that. But I think strategically, I like to keep things simple. Strategically, every organization and individuals who are going to be experts in this area have to understand how to build a system security plan. That's really critical. And at the end of it, you got to know those 320 assessment objectives. So that's what the methodology has to cover. Next one. So that's it. I'm really excited about the group we have here today. Everyone's really passionate. We compete, we collaborate. It's an ecosystem. You don't want to be in the stadium. You gotta be on the football field playing in the game. Real opportunities here. Thank you.
Dan, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Hey, I want to characterize something for you. There's opportunities if you're serving right now and you're going to exit. Your knowledge and expertise are needed to understand the way the government works, and you can take this training and you can land in a great spot in the civilian world defending the country. There's opportunities if you are serving and you're staying in to understand what this is and how it applies to the contractors, the primes and subcontractors that are helping you, and letting them know that this might be tedious, but it's not impossible. And I think there is, if you're in the world of providing services, many of the people here, the opportunity is to support all the contractors. So there's a lot of opportunity. It's very rare that something like this comes online to create a new market that also has a mission, a why behind it that's worthy of getting behind. And I think, so there's something for everybody to do here, and you can do great things and make money at the same time.
And I'll just tell you, when CMMC came around, I've been advocating for some kind of way to make sure people are doing what they need to be doing. Ever since I started playing with SBU 150 years ago. And like I said earlier, we've just ignored this for so long. And now we're in a world of hurt. We got a lot of problems, and this is why we have the problems. A little bit of emphasis on what they were saying earlier, though. As a CCA or a CCP, you have to have that expertise. You have to make that marker to be an instructor. So we're not just building teachers. Teachers are coming out of the technical environment, out of the assessment environment. All of the provisional assessors and the provisional instructors have done FedRAMP, have done CIS, have done all of the different models you can think about. So they're very established in this space. So we got a time for questions. I have some questions. I'd rather you ask questions. There's a mic right here. And while you're getting up to go to the mic, I'll start with my questions. So I'd like to start down in the end with Ali and David. So from a learning perspective, we've talked about, maybe beyond just getting a CCP certification, folks in the ecosystem, the organizations seeking compliance, should probably get a CCP or a CCA on staff. Ali, what do you think, and how do you think that would work?
Yeah, I'll use the phrase, we cannot afford to be illiterate to the CMMC standard. And establishing literacy in the CMMC ecosystem, it's not complicated. There are two designations, two credentials, CCP and CCA. I'll make a statement, many may disagree with this statement, but I cannot envision an organization that's in the DIB that does not have a person who's gone through the certified CMMC professional program. You gotta have that awareness, you gotta have the knowledge to know what you need to do in order to get certified as an organization.
Yeah, I would agree with,
You need to.
I got to figure out which one here is working. I would agree with Ali. One of the things that we've seen, and it's analogous, and I think we've all at the organizations that we're in have hired consultants from time to time. You can hire a consultant to come in, take your watch, tell you what time it is, and fix it once. And then they leave, and things don't go as they seem as time elapses and things change. So to Dan's point, to Ali's point, I think it is about literacy. And interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, organizations are actually asking us to come in to do training, not just for people who are looking to go through the training and ultimately potentially to get the credential, but actually C-suite people and department heads that are looking for awareness as to what this is all about, what it means, what the implications for their organizations are, and how to help the organization manage through that. So awareness is building. If you haven't thought of that, you may want to do so because it seems to be picking up.
And then extending on that same question, literacy, right? I've been involved with some assessments. I know my two friends here have been involved. Where do you see the ability to get through an assessment, even a pre-assessment, with a group, an organization that doesn't have that expertise in-house? Because remember, you got to own this. This is your cyber program. This is your protection program. You need to live this. It needs to be perpetual. It needs to be habitual. It's all on you. So when you walk in and they don't have somebody that's necessarily literate in this space, does that make it harder to assess?
The answer is yes. The literacy problem is, I don't know, it's a huge problem, actually. So I love that concept. I like to use that. And we come in, and a lot of organizations have a part-time point of contact that maybe had some IT exposure and then got given the great opportunity to be the CMMC compliance person. But she hasn't spent the time with 320 seconds a day to familiarize herself with the assessment process. And it's been just a checkbox initiative, and that's really problematic as you get in and you start to see what they do. I want to deviate a little bit because we, in the RPO world, deal with customers that are just kind of getting started. There's one man, one woman shop, and what we're seeing is just the first 3 basic steps to compliance or starting your compliance is literacy, knowing what it's all about. 2, getting your system's description and understanding the workflows that are going, and then being able to understand the actual scope of where your FCI and CUI are. And we're not, and there's literacy about your own environment that we're seeing is lacking. So we put a lot of time in that. But if we come in and we have someone that's not aware of the tenets, the principles that CMMC is trying to espouse, we have to fight that battle before we can actually get into I haven't even started the assessment. We're just getting you to a point where we can identify where the CUI is and why we're looking at it before we can even start to identify what controls you have. And if you're in that situation right now, 2025 is coming up very quickly, and it's going to be problematic for you.
Toby?
I guess I would add, there's a philosophical issue here. People are pencil whipping in regs. They're just going through and checkbox. Our job as assessors is to look for muscle memory in the organization. Are they actually doing it, and is it real? And I think there's a perceptual split, and the effort the DoD is going through, with tremendous effort, is to bring this together to move from pencil whip to actuality, to real muscle memory. The most recent, 7024 contract officers shall consider the SBRS score in awarding a contract. The gates are closing quickly to enforce that this has to be real. Muscle memory, something you're really doing, not pencil whipping it. And that's a change. It's going to take a little time, but we don't have a little time. So the next 18 months, it'll become very real.
Thank you, guys.
So along those lines, my company just won a Can you hear me? So my company just won a contract, and we're going through security clearance. How does CMMC relate to security clearance and the standards there? Because I'm going to be doing both of those, it sounds like, at the same time.
Can we take that? Okay, so they're not directly related, but they are tangentially related. Your security clearance is a different set of regulations, and you have your FSO, you have your facility clearance you're going to get. Your people are going to go through suitability checks, that whole part, right? CMMC doesn't touch that. It is about information and information flow. CMMC is making sure that you're doing the rules about information flow, right? We're just assessors. The normal English is auditing, but that is not the proper term. We're assessing, right? Whether or not you're doing the things as it relates to how information flows from the client, from the government, into your organization, things that you create on behalf of the client, the government, and how it goes back and you protecting information. So it's related, but they're two different things. The concepts of spillage for secrecy do apply when it comes to CUI. You have the same types of responses, but they're in parallel, right? They're not actually commingled.
Yeah, I will add to that, and I tell my students this, if you're old enough to remember when we had confidential information, right? And then we decided we don't need to protect that anymore. We made it SBU, then we made it something else. But the reality is, it's got a lot of synergy. So if you are compliant with the Industrial Security Manual, you probably have a lot of processes and procedures in place that you can leverage into CMMC. The other thing I'd say about that is the primary difference is with classified material, you have to have a clearance and you have to have a need to know. There's no clearance in the CMMC 800-171 requirement, but the people that handle the data must have a lawful reason to touch, process, share, whatever with that, read that data. So that's the discriminator, and that lawful process means that it's incumbent on you as a manager to make sure that only the people that are supposed to see that information, supposed to process that information, are lawfully required to see that information. Do we have another question?
Yeah. So I heard loud and clear that this is not a one-time thing. This is a continuous, right? So, do you have some ideas to share in terms of how the companies need to really manage this as an ongoing basis? The 320 objectives is not a small number, right? And once you implement it, you go through the assessment, let's say next month everything is clear. Then going forward, how does the companies really need to empower themselves, whether the tool set or the people, to make sure that this actually doesn't, off the guardrails later on, 3 months from later after the assessment, right? So, what would be, some of your ideas or inputs towards how companies can really empower themselves? Are there tools? Are there procedures that we need to implement? Exactly how you think this continuous implementation can be done?
I'd like to jump in on that and use a term maybe you'll use. It's called the compliance hangover. So you work hard, you get compliant, and then you don't have an assessor coming back for a year, 3 years, and you're like, oh, I can kind of rest on my laurels. And you lose visibility to what you've had in those controls. So at its foundation, you have to keep a cadence, and actually that should be in your system security plan, what you're continuously monitoring. You can do things to pick what you're looking at, but you should be constantly looking. That SSP, I think everyone will agree, is your Bible or your guiding document for compliance going forward. And if it's done correctly, that's going to tell you what you should be looking at over a periodic basis, honestly. We offer, I'm not trying to sell the service, but a lot of our customers don't have the teams to stay on top of those controls and keep that type of cadence for the continuous monitoring and change control. So we offer to do that, and we can as an RPO. It's a difference from being a C3PA, so we can work like a consultant and advisor and do the services that are core to us. But the idea is that it's exactly written in your plan. And if you're not following your plan, you're not going to be compliant. But if you actually have meaning behind it, you probably believe in it. You just have to make sure that management believes in it and continues to give you budget for it. So that's my thing, is that you already had it in your plan. There are resources that you could use to do that, but implementing some type of internal audit that can assure that you have the muscle memory and enforce the muscle memory, make you work out every quarter, is really the simple answer. There's no silver bullet to it, but it should be planned, and you should be handling it as part of that plan.
Yeah, I think you got to own it. You got to own it at every level of the organization. One of the reasons my little company was successful was because I did what I was telling everybody else to do, and I made sure they did what they needed to do. And if you don't do that, if you're not living this is a maturity model. If you're doing the same thing you were doing in year 3 that you were doing in year 1, you're not following the program, right? You need to constantly work on that. I'd like to bounce off of that and talk to the education folks. What, beyond just getting a CCP or a CCA training, what other training can you offer companies to keep that maturity going beyond just meeting those minimum requirements?
I'll jump in and just turn it over to Ali just real quickly. When I referred to people, process, and technology as a broader learning company, we do focus on change and the impact that organizations are looking for. And to be honest, sometimes the hardest thing is actually the change in the question that you asked. Great, I took the magic pill, I went through the pain and suffering. It's like the January 1st diet plan, and you get where you're going. And the minute you get there, you're like, boy, those desserts look great. Business continuity is key. We've got clients that once they get any type of certification or any type of assessment like is being described here with CMMC, they realize that change management, business continuity, and some of the other elements of business behavior need to be injected into the organization. And so I would encourage you not to bite all of that all at once. But if you are going to invest, which you need to become compliant with CMMC, it behooves you to think through how are you going to go through managing change to make sure that you have the business continuity. And that's a learning curve too. It's not just something that people can flip on and off.
No, I agree with you, David. Going back to the question, CMMC at a high level is all about securing the supply chain, the cyber supply chain. And the magic number, this 320 that has come up a few times here, to go back to your question, if you read through exact words in each of those 320, it's going to force the issue on you for continual improvement. It's very precise, it's very prescriptive. They've done a great job in terms of articulating that and providing examples for that. So I think that Japanese word, which they've used so well with the car companies, continual improvement, Kaizen, couldn't summarize CMMC in one word better than that word. It will force, and the reason I think organizations have to be very serious and start early with CMMC is that, there is certification tied into it. Certification brings credibility, and it's evidence-based. If you don't have the evidence to produce on a continual basis, you're not going to be able to maintain that certification. So I think the combination of it's a global standard, it's securing the supply chain, wherever that supply chain may be, evidence-based, I think all of those really lead to where it's going to be highly impactful in impacting the DNA of any organization.
So real practically, if you have an ITAR program or export controls and somebody's already running that program, or if you have an ISO 9001, 27001, or 20000, crosswalk the regs. The frameworks have so much overlap. You're probably doing a lot more than you think you're doing. And those people who are managing your internal compliance programs already, you may be surprised at how far along you are and your ability to execute. So definitely if you're running, especially if you have an ITAR program and you're doing it well, you know how to handle the information already. You know more than you think you know.
Hi guys, thank you so much for your time supporting AFCIA. I have a couple of questions, but I'll start with a couple of comments. So when CMMC was introduced, it kicked off a whole industry, right? And everybody came on bandwagon, including myself. There are CMMC C3PAOs up the wazoo in Florida. I don't know what's with Florida. But so a couple of questions is, one is, yes, when you have a C-level, when you have IT-aware organization, you can talk CMMC because your 800-171 is in IT English. But when you're talking to somebody who makes nuts and bolts for that vest Toby spoke about, how are you going to translate that? And my question really is, how is this ecosystem of stalwarts like yourselves helping small businesses of a 40-person organization creating nuts and bolts for that vest? How can you come together to provide something more meaningful and more efficient? That's question one, and I'll let you answer that.
I'd actually like to jump in on that because you're Ali and David, and then really Toby, it's culture. And you're talking about building in things that may not have been there before. So I mentioned change management. You mentioned continuous improvement. Those are typically, especially in smaller organizations, new concepts that take time to actually build into the culture. And familiarity, explaining to your network administrator why he has new controls, so he internalizes that, is really an important piece of training that we don't talk about. You don't need a CCP, but that he may need to have some understanding of what he's doing. And working on that culture, just like we do with the security culture and security training, involving this other staff that are involved, starting at the top. You have to have the buy-in at the C level, and it has to be something more organic than just we need it to get contracts. It has to be we're doing this as a cultural change, and even a belief that it is reducing risk because you didn't have that framework. Again, there's no silver bullet to doing it, but changing that culture and implementing that SSP is really important. I did want to say one other thing about Toby, and I really appreciate you mentioned 27001. But we do that. We get clients that say, here's our 27001, here's our ISMS. Okay, we're good now with our SSP. Scopes are different. So they do crosswalk, but you have to be really careful about what you're looking at in your ISMS and make sure that matches or make them match before you start to do the crosswalk. But that's a great head start if you have one of those certs already.
I would say it's not our responsibility. It is each company's responsibility, and we're all adults. I can suggest gamification and using the glossaries. Its adult learning principles indicate that gamification has less evaporation after a training. Like right now, it's about 70% knowledge evaporation after a training session. And if you use gamification, so to give you a concrete idea, say, everybody tell me what a period is, a period of time. Well, in the glossary, a period happens to be once a year. That's not a definition that people think is normative. So companies could use gamification with the glossary and say, hey, if somebody knows these 5 things, they get to go to Outback Steakhouse next week, something along those lines to make it a little fun, help people get integrated into the idea, and once they learn the terminology, it's not nearly as intimidating.
Great. In the interest of time, a second question, and interesting, David and Uday, you brought this up, is you spoke about how CMMC is something of a universal standard. But interestingly, a few weeks ago, I was briefed along with some of my colleagues by the CISO of one of the largest law enforcement agencies, who said that CMMC is not the answer, and that agency is going to pursue their own methodology to do what you're suggesting. So it's an interesting take. Just want to understand your take on stuff like this which comes out, which kind of contradicts and puts small businesses at odds. Okay, we serve the DoD and this large law enforcement agency. Where do I go? Or I have to do both? So your comments, sir.
If I could just, a couple of comments. One is that there is a lot of credibility with the NIST body of work across industries. And when the CMMC 2.0 reset took place, they tightly aligned CMMC 2.0 on the NIST 171, 172 standards. That established a lot of credibility and simplified the whole ecosystem. So I think, whatever agency you're talking about, they could look at another body of work. But I think when you think of NIST and a certification program built on NIST, tightly aligned to it, it is CMMC.
Yeah, and I think it's more correct to say 800-171 is the standard. How you assess that standard may vary. Will other government agencies reinvent the wheel? I guarantee it. Even within DoD, we see them do different things in different services and stuff like that. But I think it's going to start normalizing. It'll have to, because you talk about small businesses, and that's near and dear to my heart. I've worked for 2 big businesses and about 5 small businesses, and I don't want anything to do with big business normally. But the reality is you need to get in there and help them, whether it's through an internal CCP or CCA or getting help outside with the scoping piece. Because I think the thing that makes this 320 number so daunting is they don't know what it applies to. And until you know what it applies to, and by the way, how can I separate things so this part doesn't apply, right? Get that help, get that understanding. And I think you get that if you do this 320 seconds a day, go through this process to understand what they're really asking for. Because it's doable, right? But it's definitely not doable if you don't understand the literature, if you don't have the literacy of what we're doing. Okay, we got time for one more question. Anybody?
Going back to a small business. So I do a lot of work with my MSP. How do I need to have them included in the CMMC process?
Where to go? You want me to go?
Oh, I'll let you go.
Okay.
That's. I will say I'm letting Toby go because that's been a topic of discussion in the town halls and all of what we're talking about on the implementation side and how you're dealing with the MSPs, which I think I heard, who actually have access to the level where all your access controls are going to have to be reviewed and what they're going to do. I'm saying we're still struggling with getting proper guidance from my perspective, so I'm hoping Toby can offer something insightful. So I'm letting him go. I'm excited.
Well, thank you, Greg. So you should start with the shared responsibility matrix, right? So all of the things in CMMC are inherited from 853 or FedRAMP, right? So it's a little chunk of FedRAMP. So your MSP should at the very least have a shared responsibility matrix. And then you'll want to ask them for the things that they say they are doing to give you artifacts, in English, evidence that they are doing those things, so that when I come in and assess you, that then you can produce those artifacts or evidence for me as an assessor to demonstrate that they are actually doing those things. If it is a shared responsibility where you're both doing those things, you should talk about that ahead of time. And the assessment guide has a discussion section. It's written in plain English. It'll tell you what I'm looking for. Go to the discussion section in the CMMC assessment guide, and it's going to let you know exactly the words. I'm using those words. I'm going to ask that exact question. So if you read the guide, you will know the question, and you can be prepared to provide that piece of evidence. There is a challenge that is not clear, and that is something called FedRAMP moderate equivalency. And that is a subject that is still unclear. If I call up a 3PAO and say, I would like to be FedRAMP moderate equivalent, the first thing they'll ask me is, well, how do you have a relationship with the government? Because to do a FedRAMP assessment, FedRAMP has built in that you have a counterpart. It's not just you, you're interacting with an agency or somebody who, right? So if you don't have that, quite a number of the things in FedRAMP you can't do because you have no one to give them to, right? And so so saying somebody has to have FedRAMP moderate equivalency is something that has to be worked through, but at the very least have that shared responsibility matrix and hold them to the same standards you hold yourself.
And if I may, Toby, just one other thing, because in the audit, you're going to be looking at the attestations and certifications that the MSP may have. That's okay. I would encourage that. The issue that we have is exactly what Toby said. Their willingness, first of all, and then their ability to provide in your instance, the evidence that we need to see that they're doing the controls they're responsible for has been really difficult in my experience. So that's something I hope to get involved with more MSPs to try to get them to align to it. But what we're seeing is too often they're just hiding behind their ISO certification and their SOC 2, which really is just too broad. And it really hurts the customers that are paying for their services because they can't produce the log files that we need or the proof even that they are following the role-based access or other access controls that they have. And it's hugely dangerous. The SolarWinds nightmare should scare everybody because all MSPs are typically using SolarWinds. So that's my biggest problem with that, and there really hasn't been a way to crack that nut because the agreements that you have, your MSP agreements, aren't in tune with the new compliance requirements that you're going to have.
So what I would selfishly say is we give away for free all of M&S Group's policies, procedures, and practices for MSPs, and at no charge you can talk to any of our CCAs and ask implementation questions. And if you know an MSP that's really good, we'd love to help them become a C3PAO and be an uncle, a big brother, and help them along. It's part of our volunteer work for the Cyber AB. So we're here to help other people become great competitors to us.
So thank you very much. I'm going to close out by saying, just remember, this is your organization's SSP. It's your organization's cybersecurity program. You got to own it. You got to bring it in and own it. It's not somebody else doing it. It's not, oh, I'm in the cloud, I'm done. It's all your responsibility. You're the one up for evaluation. And there's no doubt this is going to happen. Is it going to happen by the end of this year? I don't have that crystal ball. But this is going to happen. And there are reasons that it's not going to be later than mid-2025 when things are going to start shutting down for contractors to be able to achieve contracts without some kind of compliance. So call up our instructors and our learning capabilities, our RPOs and our C3POs. Get yourself on a track for compliance. Do it now. Because if you wait much longer, you're going to be holding the bag and not being able to bid on contracts. Thank you very much. Thanks for interacting, and we'll talk to you out there.
After the session.
Control your excitement.